Welcome to Actions and Limits. My name is Justin Atherton. I'm the Peak Performance Consultant for Confidence Unchained. With me as always is Paul Fortune. Paul is a mindset coach and the founder of A Call to Action. And together we make Actions and Limits. Welcome to the show, the podcast where we talk about the actions we can take and the limits we create. Paul, we got another guest coming on today. I'm excited. Maureen Metcalf. She's another leadership consultant. She's involved in a lot of different things, but I'm excited to have her come on the show. But how are you doing, man? How's everything going?
You know, we're hanging in there. You know, like we've talked in the past, we're kind of adjusting to the new normal, going forward on, the new rules and regulations, and it seems like every day it's changing. So, adapting with that is important. How about yourself?
Good. Still a little overworked, but I'm looking at some of the restrictions getting lifted slowly as we go forward and hopefully are on our way out of this thing. But yeah, it's been interesting. It's about, like you said, adapting to what's going on and taking it day by day because something changes every day, right? So
you got to keep a positive mindset on this. You really, really do. And don't be down on yourself. I mean, there's people I've talked to and they feel bad because, they were taking a nap or whatever. And I go, stop feeling bad for yourself. I mean, this is a time where, you probably needed to recharge the battery, everybody go. And now, the last few weeks we've been kind of like on a halt. So, a lot of people are maybe catching up on some sleep and some family time and some other things. So don't beat yourself up if you're not productive on every single moment of the day, because, the orders were to stay at home and there's only so much you can do. So if you took some time to relax and not really do too much, it's all good. You know what? The world's going to be coming back and you're going to be productive again. So let's just keep going.
Yeah, I like that, Paul. It's a good mindset to have, like you said, keep going, pushing through. Again, you're just taking everything day by day and handling what's in front of you. Don't worry about, 3 months down the road, maybe even a week down the road might be a little bit different. Handle what's in front of you, handle what you can control. I think that's a really good message to put out there. So, all right, Paul. So let's bring out our sponsor. Let's mention our sponsor again. So from the beginning, Frontline Standard has been our sponsor. Frontline Standard is a veteran and law enforcement owned patriotic apparel company based out of Texas. And with every product purchased from Frontline Standard, they donate $1 to a nonprofit organization that supports American heroes and their families. You can find Frontline Standard on Instagram, Etsy, Facebook, Amazon, Pomp USA, and GovX. And if you message them directly and mention the Actions and Limits podcast, you can get 35% off your order. And Paul, I know that both of us sport their gear all the time, and maybe we're not in the gym like we used to be on a regular basis, but whether we're going for a walk or we're going to work out in our living room, it's still good gear to be wearing. I think I was wearing one of their shirts earlier today. So again, Frontline Standard, thank you for continuing to be our sponsor. So let's bring out our guest. Our guest today, Maureen Metcalf. Maureen is a founder, CEO, and board chair of the Innovative Leadership Institute. It's a highly sought after expert in anticipating and leveraging future business trends. She helps leaders elevate the quality of their leadership and transform their organizations to create sustainable impact and results. She has captured her 30 years of experience and success in an award-winning series of books that are used by public, private, and academic organizations to align company-wide strategy, systems, and culture with innovative leadership techniques. She is a fellow with the International Leadership Association. So, Paul, let's welcome out Maureen Metcalf. All right, Maureen, welcome to the show. We're glad to have you. Your bio is pretty impressive. So we really, I know Paul and I have both been looking at your content, and we're curious, you have over 30 years of experience. How did you get to where you're at right now?
Other than living on the planet long enough, we all get someplace. You know, I would love to say that it was all a plan, but the reality is, you know, life takes its twists and turns, and just as we're facing now, everything that happens, we can choose to see as a crisis or an opportunity. And so some things I made, you know, hopefully quite effective decisions about choosing a career. But even that, the reality is I picked my college major because my economics professor was cute, which isn't exactly early strategic thinking.
Sure.
Now, fortunately, it happened to be a good field to choose. And then I went into finance, and then worked with the big 6 consulting firms. And that gave me a wonderful foundation. When I left there, and this would be one of the crisis to opportunity times, it was during the Enron collapse. I was in the utilities industry, and I was up for partner, and we were going public. So my book of business evaporated overnight. Like, not only was I not going to grow it, but I was going to have none. So the question was, what next? And so I left the firm and took the opportunity to really start my own business. That was 20 years ago. Start my own firm and think about what I loved about my prior work and what I wanted to do differently. And over time, I was able to turn that into work that I really loved doing. And it's the combination of leader transformation, helping prepare leaders for disruptive times. And little did I know we would be in the midst of a pandemic talking about this.
Sure.
And also help them transform their organizations at the same time. So it is this kind of leader that is good in disruption, that is also helpful in times like this. Unlike stable times, it's a different kind of leadership. So my focus has been on building leaders who can navigate this kind of complexity.
I really like that. That's a huge insight, you know, realizing that there's a completely different type of leadership that's happening in a time of crisis.
Mm-hmm.
And you read different leadership books, and they talk about that. You know, when times are going good, you can have a certain type of leadership, but when, you know, the stuff hits the fan, it's time to crank it in gear, and you have to, you know, act in a completely different way. So I'm curious on your insights about that. Like, so how do you see leadership being different during these times of crisis?
So let me go through 7 characteristics, and I'm going to just say them off pretty quickly and give a couple sentences about them. So first is professional humility. So, you know, we all got where we got by working hard, or most of us that are in senior roles. And we know that treating other people well, trusting that they're doing the best they can and we're doing the best we can, and just being respectful. Some of the foundational stuff is really helpful, especially in the midst of a crisis, right? That people who are absolute jerks aren't good anytime, but they're especially not good now. So it's caring about the organization's results above my personal image. Putting principles ahead of personal gain. The person who wants to leverage this crisis to get their, you know, picture on the front of a magazine is really not a person I want to follow.
Yeah.
The and again, it seems like a no-brainer, but we're not all wired this way, is an unwavering commitment to right action. And so it is making the tough decisions. And think about how many leaders right now are having to decide, do we furlough people? Do we cut executive pay? Do we, how do we stretch the few dollars we have so that when we return, we'll have a business to return to, we'll be able to serve our clients.
Yeah.
Those decisions in the best of days are tough. In days like this, they're must make quickly. We don't have all the information, and we don't have good information. We don't know how long it's going to last. In retrospect, we won't agree with many of the decisions we've made, but we've got to make them, right? So it is that willingness and ability to make decisions with partial information. And that one right now epitomizes where we are. The next is 360-degree thinker. I consider the second, certainly the first order impact of my decisions, but also second and third order. So an example is a local restaurant chain that has early on closed. We're in Columbus, Ohio. They laid off 4,500 people. They made that decision very deliberately because people, many of them will get as much on unemployment as they would, especially with hours cut back.
Yeah.
So
That's crazy.
Yeah. So it is not a bad decision for the employee. It sounds awful. Restaurant closes, they're not doing we're open for carry out, but not dine in. It sounds bad to say they just shuttered. But their calculation was the people who work for us will actually be better off and will save the enterprise, and we should be able to come back relatively strongly, even if it's a phased comeback. So that's an example of thinking through what are the implications, considering government bailout money and health of their employees and all of the PR things that go with it. The fourth of seven is intellectually versatile. This is that growth mindset, be curious. So I need to understand beyond my immediate sphere. I also, and it leads into this 360-degree thinker, I need to understand my industry. I need to understand tangential connections to my industry so that I can even figure out what are those second and third order implications.
Sure. Yeah, Paul's all about that growth mindset.
Yeah, absolutely. That's huge to me.
Yeah.
Would you want to work for someone who's not learning?
No, not at all. That's a fixed mindset. Not at all.
As quickly as the world's changing, there is some quote about in a crisis, you don't want to work with someone who is learned. You want to work with someone who is learning.
Absolutely. Constantly learning.
Yeah. So you are the kind of guy I want to work for and I want to work with. Authentic and reflective. So these are people who develop themselves and others. Again, especially in a difficult time like this, we're all going to make mistakes. We're all going to do things that nobody sees that we wish we hadn't done, and things that we publicly do or say, right? When we're talking to our teams and we don't have time to write the speech and practice the speech. It's, we are doing the best we can in every moment. And some moments we're going back and apologizing.
Can I ask you a question about that?
Yeah.
Is there a mistake that you're seeing a lot of people make right now? And if you do, well, what can you do to overcome that mistake?
That's a great question. My sense is people are frozen. Not to say that they're not working hard, but have gone very, very tactical. And again, for many people that's required, but that has to be balanced with staying in touch with critical stakeholders. And it's hard to do when you're spending 10 or 12 or 16 or 20 hours a day making sure the computers are running and people are physically safe. Connecting with their human side as well as their technical side is important, because people are afraid, right?
Yeah.
And so when fear governs, our prefrontal cortex shuts down, our primitive brain takes over. We don't think as clearly, we don't behave as well, and it is that we are wired to stay alive.
Survival mode, right?
Yeah, but putting everyone in survival mode means, again, we're not thinking critically, we're thinking immediately.
Mm-hmm.
And as quickly as we can, get people back to trusting that for the large percentage of us that will not be infected, we need to be thinking about how do we live our lives, support our families, take care of our communities, and don't be stupid, right? I'm not saying, throw big block parties or parades in the street. Do the social distancing, wear the masks, and continue to move forward as effectively and with care and grace as we can.
Yeah, I really like that. That's all those things you touched on is what makes a great leader, right? And you have to be able to have those qualities, especially in times like this. So I think that's super important to have all of those and realize, hey, this is a different time. Maybe you haven't been an effective leader in the past. Maybe it's time for you to step back, reflect, and ask your peers, like, hey, what else can we do? Like, obviously, this is outside my scope. Like, be able to admit that, right? Like, how huge is that ability to be able to admit, like, hey, I don't know it all. We've never experienced this before. Like, how do we move forward? Any ideas,
So Justin, that's a brilliant observation. There were two others. One is innately collaborative, learn from others' perspectives. Because exactly as you said, we are in a situation that no one has seen and most people have not done drills for, right? Other than our US military, many of us have not planned for a pandemic. So we have to admit, we don't know how to get through this. We all have, I think, a point of view, and many of them are good. How do we get the smartest people in a room and be also willing to not have to be the one who's right? This is, again, tying back to admit that I don't know everything, admit that other people have better ideas than I do, admit that I'm going to go forward with the idea the collective has come up with, even if I don't agree with it. Or don't entirely agree with it. And then the final one is inspire followership. How do we help people who are afraid trust that we can take the next step? We don't have to know what's going to happen 3 months from now, and we won't know unless we have abilities that are beyond this podcast conversation. But how do we build enough of a good next step and trust one another to take it, course correct, and then build the next step?
What would you recommend for the, maybe the middle management level or just the regular employees? What can they do with leadership to help move this movement forward?
Are you talking specifically about the pandemic situation?
Yes, with the pandemic, with some of the middle management or employees that don't really have a big say in what goes on in the company. What can they do to help move that culture forward with this pandemic?
So it's interesting. There's some good research about how work groups can be vibrant, even if organizations aren't. So working within my immediate work group and solving the problems we need to solve and demonstrating these behaviors. Well, these are, we're calling them leadership behaviors. There is no reason that I, as an entry-level employee, shouldn't also demonstrate humility, be authentic and reflective, be kind to people, right? So they're a must for leaders. They are beneficial for everyone.
Yeah.
So get for my work group to either set our priorities and figure out how we can collaborate to get them done. It is a way we can at least make forward progress.
I like that, because you shouldn't wait until you are in a position of leadership to become a leader. And so I think, like you said, all of those attributes, like you said, are necessary for leadership and to be a leader. But everyone else, if you have those, if you exude those, all you're doing is helping yourself and everyone around you out. And you are a default leader, whether you have a title or not. So I think that's
and that's the thing I think recognize is how many people look to each of us in our different roles in our communities and our families, and they emulate us.
Mm-hmm.
So the parent who's screaming at the side of a sports event with their kid, somebody will emulate that and think it's okay behavior.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I saw an interview that you did a couple of years ago, and you kind of talked about the culture, and you talked about, back in manufacturing many years ago, where you kind of punch the clock, you shut up, you don't do anything, and then go on break, go back, and you were kind of like a robot. And you were talking about, culture now. It's okay to have some sort of human connection with everybody within reason. Obviously, you want to keep everything professional, but you were saying that might help production, that people care about each other more than just, you're a number of an employee. Can you kind of go through that for us? Because I thought that was very interesting.
Thank you. So the work of Gallup, the Gallup polling people, they do a lot with employee engagement. And they found statistics like only 8, and I have not memorized these, so I'm not reading off a sheet, but something like only 8% of employees are fully engaged at work if they don't have a quote best friend at work. Mm-hmm. And they have a very precise definition of this. I'm again going to go from my interpretation. There are people I trust to give me honest feedback, to have my best interest in mind, to help me progress, compared to the people who are going to see me do something stupid, take a picture of it and post it on Instagram, right? Or send it to my boss and make sure that I am.
That's trust, right? That's a trust factor.
Yeah. Yeah. So we want that in a business setting. And when we create that kind of trust and relationships, then what I'm free to do, and unlike the old manufacturing environments where, kind of think industrial age, we show up, we do a task, and the task is optimized so that I don't think I follow directions. Very few people that I know now live in that industrial environment where they're really not expected to think. So even people in factories are running very complex machines, and they're interpreting what's happening. And so how we manage people who are expected to think, if I don't have a degree of trust among my colleagues, I'm not going to put forth creative ideas. I'm going to only follow the rules, do what I'm required, and no more, because it's dangerous. So to create an environment where people are not creative like doing new PR campaigns, but creative as in solving business problems. If I'm afraid that I'm going to be punished for that, I'm going to just do the minimum. And those environments over time are going to be surpassed by environments where people are encouraged to bring their brains to work. And what allows them to bring their brains to work is the level of support and culture of creativity and innovation that that make it safe and expected. That back to, we're kind of all committed to the mission of the organization or the work group, and of course we're going to support one another in making it better.
Like that, it brings up some memories of being a supervisor, a leader, and thinking of the different environments to where, like you said, the trust and the safety of it, like for it to be safe to fail at something, rather than being afraid that you're going to be chastised or fired or looked down upon. All that does is hinder growth and innovation and problem solving, because then, oh, I'm afraid to fail. So then I'm going to be afraid to try anything new, to step outside my scope. And so it takes a long time. I remember clearly taking over for another supervisor who was an ineffective leader, and the team that I was working with, some of them were very hindered by their own fear of failure. And it was categorized as them being lazy or scared or whatever it is about the job, when in essence it was just they were inexperienced and they were afraid to fail because of the poor leadership that came before them. And once that trust was built and they were able to be, hey, it's okay to mess up, like we all mess up, and give people that space, it creates huge developments and huge teamwork and more innovation and more productivity overall. So I think that that's super important when you talk about having that safe area, be able to trust that.
And it sounds like you very much created that when you took over.
Oh, for sure. I had to go out of my way to build a trust with all the team members. And that's something that I think a lot of leaders have to be cognizant of, is what have you inherited? What culture have you inherited? What environment have you promoted yourself into? And where are the shortcomings? What was going on? And how can I make this better?
So I'd be curious, what are one or two things that you did very specifically for your team so that they knew they would be safe making mistakes?
A couple things that come to mind. We would have a debrief after certain events, and we would be like, hey, what did we do good on? What did we do bad on? Okay. How could we have prevented those things? So having a discussion about it immediately afterwards, not waiting next week till we forgot about it and our memories are fogged. Immediately after the incident, hey, let's talk about this, the things we did good, things we did bad. And then if it was something minor that we could solve there, then that was it. There was no write-ups. There was no come to my office. It was handled on the spot. I think that was number one. And then also, the individual, like, meeting with each person, seeing where their deficiencies were, asking them about their own deficiencies, where they thought they were doing well and poorly, and then helping them build that into a stronger asset, and then watching it develop from there, like giving them confidence in those areas.
Especially understanding where their strengths are. I think people blossom when they can play to the things they're really good at.
Sure.
It doesn't mean they always get to do what they want to do, but if I'm really darn good at something and it's something that's required by the organization, everyone is better off that way.
Yeah, let me do it. Just let me do it a lot, as much as you'll let me do it, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, and I think it's important for leaders to evaluate their team like that. And I think a lot of the time we lack that personal touch. And I know, for myself, just, you got me thinking about, that team that I led, was I would spend, like, maybe once a month, I would spend half a day with each team member and see what they were doing, go through the process, work with them, so they could see how I work through some of the problems too, giving them another aspect to think about. So, and I know we don't always have that time. A lot of companies and teams don't have that. But when I did, I took advantage of it.
That's one of the other things, is the investment of your time as the manager. And there's another Gallup statistic: people who are most disengaged are the ones who have bosses who are absent. They are more disengaged than the ones who have bad bosses. And I get that some organizations are not structured such that the leader has that time, but it really makes a difference for the employees. And depending on level in the organization, that will fluctuate as well. But having someone who actually cares about my success and is willing to invest whatever whatever appropriate time is required, it, again, ups the engagement level, ups the level of success. And then I'm able to go off and do more and willing to do more because I know my boss has my back.
And put yourself out there too. And we end up having the most productive, team, in the department. So it makes a difference. Like that personal touch, like making contact with people and letting them know you care. That's a huge aspect too.
If I were to pick one thing, and tell me if you disagree, but it seems almost intuitively accurate. I'm going to work harder for someone who works hard and cares about my success.
Yeah, 100% agree with that. In my experiences with having a boss, the boss that I felt had my back the most, I was going to the wall for them. The one that I felt like really didn't care, then I really didn't care. I mean, I had pride in my work, but I didn't go that extra step because that boss didn't care.
It's contagious.
Yeah, role modeling. I wanted to go back. I'm sorry. Were you going to add something to that? I apologize.
I was just going to say, so often, especially in university settings, we teach the technical skills, how to be an engineer, how to be a physician, how to be an accountant or attorney. We don't often teach the importance of the interpersonal skills, that I can't be a good leader of people. I can be a good engineer, but I can't be a good team member as an engineer if I don't have basic communication skills. Even if I genuinely care about the people I work with, if I can't convey it appropriately, I've still missed the mark.
100% agree with that. I wanted to go back to culture real quick because you said something else in the interview that was very interesting to me. You were talking about placement of items in an office that can change people's mood. And I want to know what should be in an office that would increase the mood and things that are in the office that will decrease your mood.
I think it's person dependent. You see a little bit of my office here, and I'll say for disclosure, I took some of my art down, but I have things behind me like a little statue from a group of executives that I did work with in Nigeria. I have a book, I have a bunch of books I contributed to. In front of me is a piece of art, and I'm going to see if I can turn this around, because it tells you a little bit about me and what inspires me. So it's a bird, and you can't really see it, but the bird is surrounded by a bunch of little tiny ladders, and those ladders are tethered to the bird. And so what that's
interesting
to me is the things that we think are the ladders we're climbing are often the things that hold us back. So what inspire, and most people would not walk into a store and say, I want that one. Or some of my other art. But when I look at that, as I'm sitting at my desk, I think about, who am I being right now and who do I aspire to be? So I would say from how do we create an environment where we can be optimally productive, is that. And it's everything from the color of the walls, that in green is helpful for creativity and inspiration. For other people, they really want something more quote professional, and they feel most safe and less exposed to others by keeping it just very professional. And for a person coming into someone's office, I like to see a picture of a family or a pet or something, because it gives me an artifact that tells me about them, and also gives me the opportunity to ask a question about their family or something. So an opportunity to bond and connect. I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah, I just wanted to know if there was some universal, you mentioned the color green. There's some universal things that you would see in an office that would that would promote, positive thinking, or things in the office that will do the opposite and would have detriment thinking?
I know there is a lot of research on color. I am not an expert on that.
Okay.
But I would say, depending on our wiring, some of the more startup cultures have the ping pong tables and bars and foosball tables and meditation rooms. In some cultures, they are absolutely helpful. But you can't. I worked with a client who set aside an office and turned it into a meditation room, and then it became a storage closet. You can't put a meditation room in an environment that will punish you for meditating.
Sure.
Right? It's got to be, the culture has to support the artifact, or it's people see it for how ridiculous it is.
Yeah, if it's not getting support by the administration or the leaders there, and you're not able to do it, or you get chastised.
Yeah.
Maybe the previous leader put that there. Yeah, we'll have a meditation room, and they moved on, and the guy that takes over is like, nah, not so much.
Well, or I read it in an article, Google has meditation rooms, so we need to have a meditation room. You're not Google. What is appropriate for your culture? They have a culture where meditation is accepted. Mm-hmm. If you don't, then think about a gym or something that would be aligned with the environment you're trying to promote. It could be equally as health focused. It just has to match who you are.
Yeah, I think that's very important to match that culture. So a couple questions, focus on, as far as the title of the podcast, Actions and Limits. What would you say is one major action that leaders can take during this time to make the most impact?
I would think of the airline, when we've probably all flown at some point in our lives now. The flight attendant saying, put your own mask on first. Take care of your own resilience. If you are in a mode that is afraid, anxious, all of those things that probably everyone is going through, cycling, either hour by hour or day by day, manage how you spend your time. It is better to cancel a meeting than getting on and being contagious. Emotionally contagious, not virus contagious. And do what you need to do to take care of your own well-being, whether it's getting outside. I live in Ohio, so every day is not sunny. We're not San Diego. I get outside even in less than beautiful weather just to have fresh air, because that recharges me. Other people will binge watch Ozark or whatever is the top show on TV, whatever it is. Spend time with your kids or your dogs or your spouse if you're happily married. Something that rejuvenates you, so that when you are interacting with people, you are able to be that leader who inspires followership. No one wants to follow someone who is overwhelmed and angry.
It's okay to be selfish, right? To worry about yourself, and then put that out there. Paul, I know Paul and I have talked about this before. The whole caveat with the word selfish, and it has a negative connotation. I know Paul has mentioned the whole put your mask on first. We need to take care of ourselves first before we can help anyone else out.
Exactly.
So it's definitely a huge thing to worry about your self-care before you try to worry about someone else's. And I think you hit it spot on, thinking it's okay to cancel a meeting if you're going in there with a horrible mindset. Mm-hmm. And you're just going to ruin that meeting. People are going to come out of there with your negative energy afterwards and go, what was that meeting even about, other than complaining or whatever the case was? So, yeah.
And so then the thing else I would say is, I heard this phrase from a colleague In times of crisis, we create opportunity. In times of catastrophe, we can evolve.
Mm.
So what is the positive outcome? Because we know what the negatives are. We know there are big numbers of people who are going to not survive this. And we know there are a lot of business challenges that will ripple through families and communities, and they're going to be awful. That's the catastrophe side. How do we also capture the opportunity to evolve as colleagues, as community members, as family members, as a human family that would only happen in this crisis? Kind of like forest fires are required to have some plants germinate. What is the opportunity, or what are the opportunities that can germinate only in this kind of a catastrophe?
Yeah, I think there's an interesting psychological term there, and I wish I could remember it, but it's the idea that, sometimes people need to hit rock bottom before they can make that transformation. They have to, experience some traumatic event for them to
Mm-hmm.
be able to make that huge shift and change in their life. And I know that there's a specific term about it. It's just escaping me right now, but it's maybe that this will be that for a large number of people that have lost their job, lost a family member,
Mm-hmm.
whatever they're going through. There's so many different things that people are going through right now. So maybe this will be that, event.
Sometimes rock bottom could be that foundation to start
Yeah,
fresh.
yeah. Well, you know, I'm afraid anything I say can be misinterpreted here because so many people are going to suffer. For other people, they'll lose a job they didn't like anyway, and it's the opportunity to go figure out what they really wanted to do.
Sure.
For some people, they're in situations of domestic violence, and this may be the thing that pushes them across the line to get the help they need, because when they're fill in the blank person is in this kind of horrible situation, they are not able to control the situation, and that helps them to exit, and their children will now be safe. There are lots of scenarios where it is the crisis that will also create an opportunity, and we can't minimize the fact that people are really going to suffer.
Yeah. And I think it was very clear, yes, this is a crisis. Yes, there are a lot of people suffering. That doesn't, people finding new opportunities in this doesn't diminish what's happening, because it's still happening. And it doesn't mean that we all have to sit around and do nothing and feel sorry for each other. We can take this opportunity to learn. I
Mm-hmm.
think that's the biggest thing, whether it's leadership or your own personal development, learning from, mistakes, setbacks, and failures. That whole idea of having good emotional fortitude.
And just being kind to one another.
Yeah.
I think of a lot of examples just in our little community that people are reaching out and supporting one another in ways that we haven't in the past. And we will come out as a stronger community because of this. It doesn't undo the suffering, but it is helpful to capture the beneficial so that we don't lose hope.
I like that. Now, with the other side of the actions and limits, we as humans, we like to self-impose limits on ourselves. So what is one major limit that you see that either leaders or people in general impose that we should focus on removing?
This is a time we're often limited by our own thinking processes, our patterns, the things we've seen as possible in the past. So our own thought process is often the biggest limiter. At this point in time where the traditional limits have been broken in some cases, it really creates the invitation to imagine what's possible. What can we now create that wasn't possible for any individual in the past, or we didn't see as possible?
That reminds me of a quote I heard one time. Um, Impossible actually means I'm possible. So that kind of reminded me of that
Ah,
when you said that.
that's better than my Alice in Wonderland quote.
What is that one?
It, it's something like I think of 6 impossible things before I get out of bed in the morning or something. Um, it is the ability to be able to imagine, probably as only children can, because they haven't yet been told things aren't possible. How do we reinvigorate, not to the point of ridiculous, to getting fired or arrested, but how do we reinvigorate that part of us that is willing to say, this is what I stand for, and I'd like to make steps to make that possible.
I 100% agree with that. Children, especially 3 and 4, they have this confidence about themselves that adults would love to have. I mean, they think they're invincible. They'll jump off the table. They don't care. Reckless abandonment, and I guess within reason, as adults, we can't be doing that. But to have that attitude, that 3-year-old attitude in your work life, personal life down the road, it would be priceless.
Yeah, that's great. So Maureen, I know you're working on a whole bunch of different things right now. What are the best ways for our viewers to get a hold of you and check out your content?
So we host a radio show every week. Where during the pandemic, we're posting 2 blogs. One is the Thought Leader blog that includes the radio show. The other is something on resilience. We have a leadership assessment that is these 7 behaviors that I've talked about. That is free, and you get a series of 8 emails. We do not put you on a list and start calling you or any of that stuff. I don't have time to both harass people and create content, so I've opted for content. And you would find that by going to the homepage of the website, I think right at the top where it says take our assessment. So one of my commitments in the world is to make, like you, as much good, positive information available as possible, because I am a member of the community, the human family, and all those things. And it is through the positive work that we do with one another that we make the world better.
I think that's the number one goal, right? You make the world better, and if you're any type of efficient leader, it's about making the people around you better and making that circle wider and wider as it goes out. So thank you very much, Maureen. We'll make sure to put all of your information down in the show notes so everybody can follow you, find your information, look you up, and check out all your great content, which Paul and I have been checking out over the last few days. So thank you so much for coming on the Actions and Limits podcast. You were such a great guest. I think we learned quite a lot. So thank you, Maureen.
Thank you.
All right, Paul. Maureen was such a great guest. I know we've had other leadership coaches on here before. I think she had a different insight to share, and obviously during this time of crisis, talking about what leaders are going through and what we really need as a society or as in a company or in our country, from our leaders, and the type of leaders that will excel during this process that we're in, if you want to call it that. So what was your takeaway?
Well, a lot of examples she gave to us resonated with me a lot because I use them myself. She talked about the flight attendant telling us to put our mask on first before we help anybody else, because if we're not feeling good, we're not going to help anybody else. So our first task should be taking care of ourselves first. That way we can take care of a lot of other people. I love that. I love that saying, and she brought that up. There was another one that she did too that resonated with me as well. I can't think of it at the top of my head, but a lot of stuff that she talked about, I agreed with, and being able to adapt to this, the world's changing anyway. We've talked about it in the past with technology and everything like that. And now we're sped up, and I liked a lot of her ideas and concepts.
Yeah, and I know we slightly brought up that idea of selfishness, and I still think that that's a topic that brings up some debate. But when you word it in that way, like, make sure you're taking care of yourself first, and it's okay to cancel certain meetings or different events, so you are at your best, or at least as close as you can get during this time, rather than entering a meeting or taking a phone call when you were just not feeling it. Like, you're in a bad mood for whatever reason because you haven't processed those emotions yet. And, you have to have that realization that is not the best time to communicate with anyone unless you're
Absolutely.
working through it.
Yeah.
But
well, I mean, there's sometimes you can't cancel just because
Sure.
of whatever X, Y, and Z is.
Sure.
But yeah, if you can cancel and get in the right mindset, absolutely. I mean, that could be anything. Like, even if, I know right now a lot of people aren't reopened, but like, if you own a restaurant and you're present in your restaurant, like, say it's a small type of restaurant where you're present, you're the owner,
Yeah.
and you're in a bad mood and you're at the restaurant, you need to leave right away, because everybody in that restaurant wants to have a good time. Hopefully they want to have a good time.
Sure.
They're kind of escaping from their day because they want to, have a little bit of fun. And if they see the owner stressed out in a bad mood, that affects them, and they'll be like,
And are they
maybe I won't want to come back anymore.
Exactly. And so the other, if you can't completely remove yourself, limit your contact with people, right? Obviously, the first piece of advice I would say was to find a tool to process your emotions, have that realization, being that leader, to be like, hey, I need to step away. I need to give myself 5 minutes so I can come back and give you guys, my all, because I'm not in the right headspace at the moment. That's okay. It's okay to do that. So, but no, I think Maureen had a lot of great insight. I know, she's written several books about leadership, works on different projects. So yeah, we'll make sure to put all of her content down there, so everyone can get a hold of it and check it out. So awesome, man. It was a great show. Let's wrap it up with another segment of Ask Paul Anything. And again, everyone, make sure to send your questions in to actionsandlimits@gmail.com in order to have your questions featured on the show. And if we do choose your question, you can get some of our Frontline Standard swag, our sponsor that's been there from day one. So, Paul, this question comes in from Scott from Long Beach. And Scott says, Paul, can people change?
Absolutely, they can change. They can change at any time. The only caveat to that is, do they want to change? Because if they do not want to change, they will not change. But if you genuinely want to change, you 100% can change. And I preach that a lot with my clients in coaching. Yeah.
I think what you said there, the desire to change has to be there, right? I think that's a huge thing. And I have a lot of opinions about that topic as well. Maybe we'll bring that up. Maybe we'll make that an episode on change, because
I like it.
There's a lot that we could go into and have a discussion and a debate around the idea of change. But I think what you said was key. You're really having that desire to want to change. So again, great show, Paul. Great guest. We're working our way through the pandemic, so hopefully we see some light at the end of the tunnel.
We're working our way back to you, babe. For Justin Atherton, this is Paul Fortune. We'll see you next week.
All right, see you next Monday. Thank you for listening to the show. Don't miss an episode. Click and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow us on your favorite podcast platform, and find us on Instagram and Facebook under Actions and Limits to stay updated on all our upcoming content. Continue to email the show at actionsandlimits@gmail.com for our segment Ask Paul Anything. Thank you for listening. We'll see you next week.